Hello everyone, Santier here, and welcome to another update on Astral Collision. So the big thing that I've been working on is actually located over, well, there's a couple of things in Caledon. One of the one of the small updates is I named this Caledon properly, so that way I could remember the name when I'm looking elsewhere. But let's close some of this stuff down. The big thing right here is I have added this Forgotten Tomb area. So let's zoom in. This is now the starting location for the player team. So when the players start, they will be in here. This is a thing that they can talk to. This will provide their weapons. So if you look here, it says if such and such characters in the party, add this weapon to the party's equipment. And then just tells you found weapons. This one does it for the basic armors. And then this, of course, is just another one of the Resurrection Shrine thingies. Note that I have added this plugin command to add a journal entry. The idea is that this will eventually, I'll add all of these poems into the journal. That's the eventual goal that I want to have for that, and I want to make sure I set that up. For those who may be unfamiliar, the journal is a thing that I haven't really done a whole lot with. It's this plugin that I made that contains stuff, information, and you make entries here. So like, what is it? The Astral Collision was such and such a thing. So I'll be adding a thing for all of that later. I can show you what the journal looks like in game. That's a lot better than going through those hideous menus. One of my biggest complaints about RPG Maker is, while it's extremely extensible because it's written in JavaScript, the user interface is less accommodating. My next game project is definitely going to be in Unity because I want the power, and particularly the power to make a user interface that's not markup or awkward. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. This right here is an exit that you open later, and then this is the main exit. The Forgotten Tomb area leads into the Ancient Catacombs, which is a fairly large map, probably bigger than it needs to be, but it's full of some enemies that I added. And then right down here, if you can see at the bottom here, let's go back to 1-to-1. I'm going to kind of show this place off in Engine. I think that's a better way to get a handle of it. But this is the shortcut that you eventually open up. So you can see that it says unbarred the door, and then it plays a sound effect that sounds kind of like here. You know what? The easiest way to do is just play it. That. It sounds like that, which I feel fits. It's not the default sound for the quick action. So if you right-click, you'll get quick event creation for transfer, door, treasure, and in. I don't use this in one. But the door and transfer and treasure I will use extensively. Transfer is an easy way to make, well, things that move you from one location to another, including across maps. Doors is another way of doing that, and that's what I use for making doors, but the default door is for like a handled door that you pull, and this is a thing that slides up, and so I went in there and changed the sound effect. Now, for those who may have forgotten, over here, a long while back, I defined what all of these types of treasure chests mean. So this holds weapons, this holds offhand, armor, and accessories, consumables, crafting materials, key items, food, and money. So if we go back into the Ancient Catacombs, you'll see that these are kind of scattered around. This is probably not going to be the final arrangement of things. This right here is a bunch of dialogue things that you can interact with. This has healing potions in it. But this has a bunch of dialogue things that you can interact with in order to learn more about some of the mechanics of the game. So this block right here tells you about bonus effects from each of the stats. This one needs to get modified because wind I added... Oh, yeah, I did modify this one. So, for example, wind, this is something that I actually just added right here. So, on battle start gives you a starting amount of TP. So, if you did not choose to... If you don't have the preserve TP flag, which is a special flag that can be set in the editor on like equipment or whatever, I'm probably going to only reserve it for food to make it a special property of food. But anyway, if you have that flag, then you do not have your TP modified. If you otherwise you have your TP set to a random integer between 0 and 25, I think is probably what this function does. And then I add, after doing that, I add, presumably this works, to add the wind, a third of your wind to your TP. Actually, this probably needs to be gain TP, now that I think about it. Anyway, this will increase your TP by your wind stat. And all of the different stats have special properties associated with them. Yeah, if you're not facing up, you can't read it from behind. So if you're standing up here and trying to read down, you wouldn't be able to read it. This is the Tomb of Metatutorial, or Metatutorial. And so there's just a bunch of stuff here. This little room here is the Forgotten Temple. This is just a room where if you step into this, it cures you of all conditions and fully heals your HP and MP, and makes a little splash sound. And then there's just a book here that tells you about it. I added this as a way of being able to be kind of a proxy in while inside of this area, because it is fairly extensive and fairly large. There's a lot to loot here. It might be a bit generous, I'm not sure. And I'm likely to tweak this over time, because this is going to be a really important part. It's the first experience of the game, and you're going to be wandering around this area. You're going to be collecting loot, and eventually you need to make your way over here, down over to here, in order to be able to get out. And if we go to the world, of course it put me all the way over there. It's right here. This is where it goes. I have also added some more loot to these chests, or I've added more chests and kind of filled out the rest of these tents. Yeah, that's happened as well. Just to quickly go over, I made some enemies for that starting area. So if we go down to enemies, you can see that I have added the cave bat, the forgotten spirit, and the cave spider. These are all fairly weak enemies. They're not especially threatening. I don't have a whole lot to say about them. They don't give you a ton of experience. They do give you a chance at certain loot that's quite useful. Wings, potentially. Iron ingots. Stone will come in handy at some point. Mystical dust is something that's a pretty rare chance off cave spiders. In my test file, I've gotten like 2. There is a troop that's like full of cave spiders. So here it is. Cave bats. A cave bat, a spider, and a cave bat. A forgotten spirit, 4 spiders, a couple of bats and a forgotten spirit, a bunch of forgotten spirits, and then kind of a mix of all of them. None of them are especially threatening. They're there just to give you kind of the initial combat encounters and stuff like that. Again, this whole area is... These are actually going to be things talking about the progenitors of each of the 4 species. Humans, and then the... I have them all written down over here in this document, so I don't have to remember them. Religion, I think, is where it is. Ooh, we gotta load this sucker. Because I haven't been clicking here. Humans, Felakor, Yadar, and Rifa. So yes, those are our 4 species, and their progenitors are going to be listed in here. There's going to be some information about that, a way for people to be able to establish some lore if they want to. And then one of the big goals of this is to make sure that you have some potions going out into the world, if you explore enough, and that you have a bunch of crafting materials in order to be able to make your initial gear. And so one of the things that I wanted to make sure I did, especially between that and then the tent area, is I wanted to make sure you had access to some of the materials that you especially need, because I've added some crafting recipes as well. So just to kind of go over what that looks like, crafting recipes. There's a bunch of recipes here. So for example, what does this make? This makes an adventurer's dagger. Is that new? Probably. I'll need to talk about that. It's hard to remember exactly what I've added sometimes. Crafting costs 10 gold, and it requires certain materials. Like this requires 4 iron ingots. Again, this is the user interface I have to work with this sort of stuff. It's not ideal. It is functional. I kind of have wanted to write my own little C# program with a better user interface. I can just save the JSON file, but I'd need to look into the feasibility of all of that and whether or not this is stored in an external JSON file that I can work with, or I'm not worrying about it, but I certainly have thought about it. So AG is short for Adventurers Guild. So the Adventurers Guild Blacksmith Standard has a set of recipes to make some of the standard Adventurers gear stuff. I also had to fix a bug with salvaging. It was not directly a bug with salvaging. It was a bug with the... so if I go to... oh, I must have closed it. But the crafting stuff had a bug where the way it would look up whether or not you could salvage that thing was by the item type that you would salvage into. So salvaging is basically just a different form of crafting. Here, let's go ahead and start things up and take a look at some of these systems, because I think that'll go a little bit more smoothly than me just kind of talking over things. How loud is that? Not too bad, doesn't look like. So I'm going to just hit continue for now. So if we go over here into the Adventurers Guild house, this now has a bunch of NPCs. If you are not a member of the Adventurers Guild, they'll all basically politely say, yeah, you need to go join the Adventurers Guild. You can't hang out here. This is a person that just welcomes you to it and says, please make yourself at home. This is the crafter. So I added these weapons. The dagger and sword have their own skills. I repurposed the Fierce Thrust skill off of the knight and gave it to the adventurer's sword. And then the dagger has the backstab skill, which one of the issues is I need to fix the... You can tell that the text was not quite spaced right correctly. I did not... As I went through figuring out the spacing, I did it for a skill instead of a weapon. Because what I'll do is I'll like select this part, cut it out, like Control X, and then do this to get the spacing figured out, because otherwise it's like impossible to tell. But I had accidentally just done that, and that doesn't go far enough. So, but yeah, so I added these two weapons, these adventurers' weapons. And as you can see, they add the backstab or the fierce thrust ability. Again, the fierce thrust is just the same one that the warrior had. So if I go into skills and I go down here, here's fierce thrust, and it just does double damage to foes below 50% health, and does piercing damage. Backstab also does piercing damage and is a critical hit. You can see that the critical value is true, meaning that it will in fact be a critical hit. The 100% variance here is just that way it gives the message. This will always reliably be a critical hit because I tell it it will always be a critical hit. So those are added. Another thing that you'll notice is that Antidote is now sitting over here. This used to be a Ranger skill. I replaced the Ranger skill with a better, more general one called Apply Poultice, which is like a bundle of healing herbs. And this applies the rejuvenation state and cures a condition, just any condition, and then heals them by a bit if one was cured. So this is a much more generally usable skill. Now I took the Antidote skill and I gave it to the Adventurer Armors. So there's the tunic, the breastplate, the plate mail, and the gambeson. And as you can see, a number of these require different materials. So these the sword requires iron. This requires iron and a hide to make the sword. The tunic requires yarn and cloth. This requires an iron ingot, 10 hide, a yarn, and a cloth. The plate mail requires 15 iron ingots and 5 cloth. I have 22 and 14 of those. And then this would require 12 cloth and 2 yarn. So I needed to make yarn something that was more accessible. So that's what crafting looks like, right? It looks like that. And then these materials right here, this is the salvaging menu. It uses the same crafting thing, and it tells you how many of each material you have. But you just enter into it what things, like, instead of requiring materials to make, for example, this iron ingot, these 3 iron ingots require rusty plate mail to make. That's kind of how it works. And salvaging costs 3 monies. Now, the way that I had originally kind of set this up is the way that I was looking things up would be like, oh, this iron ingot right here. That's the first iron ingot, so that's the one that we found when we were reverse looking up the index for iron ingots. Because I'd done it all wrong, and I needed to fix it so that way I was preserving the index properly instead of re-looking it up and all sorts of things. I was basically taking like an old system and repurposing it for my use. But anyway, that process left me looking up the wrong information for determining whether or not you should be able to do it. Like right here, I can salvage a wing and some feathers, for example, which is useful for making a bow from the hunter's bow. But so it would always require, or say, in order to be able to do this, you have to have this weapon. Now, it would use the proper thing when you were deconstructing it, but for saying whether or not you were allowed to do it, it was looking at the wrong thing. So I had to fix that. That was a bit of a weird bug. And then this is just a merchant that I can buy Omnicure roots and pots of healing from. Now, something else. I've also added information about bounties here. Something else that I need to do is I need to tweak this. I need to tweak what this guy sells, because I want to remove or modify what weapons he sells. Just in part of what I'm doing for all of the balance and whatnot. Let's see, what other things have kind of explicitly happened in game that I want to show on this file? I think that kind of covers a lot of it. The general flow of the game is that I want... Basically, there's a couple of different ways of acquiring materials. You can acquire crafting materials through loot, either chests or enemies. You can acquire materials by purchasing them. There's some materials that you won't be able to purchase, or some areas where you have to go to be able to purchase specific materials. I do want to have material shops, and one of the other things too is I'm probably going to vary material costs around the place as well. But one of the things in the Capital, when I get to it, and I need to be getting to it soon, you can see that this is just a folder. Up here is supposed to be like a market area. Oh, I am already in the lower left. This is supposed to be a market area in the upper right here. So if we go to the worldo, you can see this right here. This is supposed to be a big market area, and there's going to be a lot of things like crafting materials there. So to order my thoughts, crafting materials are going to be either found from loot, or they're going to be purchased, or they're going to be salvaged. If they're going to be salvaged, the things that can be salvaged will only be able to be found as loot. I've thought some about this, and what basically happens is I don't want you to be able to do equipment or like material laundering, basically. I originally had it where you would be able to salvage the adventurer's gear after you made it, but the problem with that is then I have to make sure that because the way the salvaging calculates out the number of materials you get is based on the cost of the item. So if the item is worth X gold, then it will be the floor of X divided by the cost of the material. So, for example, if the dagger is worth 60 gold, then and iron ingots are worth 10, which is I think what they're currently set up to be at, then salvaging the dagger would give you 6 iron ingots. If it was 65 gold, it'd still give you 6 because it takes the floor, which is the truncation. So it basically ignores any fractional element. This system means that if I make the dagger cost less iron than 6 pieces, then you could effectively make a dagger and then salvage a dagger to generate more iron. And I don't want you to be able to do that loop, that sort of salvage loop of saying, oh, I go and I craft a bunch of copies of this thing, and then I salvage a bunch, so that way I can basically use gold to create iron. And I also don't want you to be able to like, oh, I'm going to go buy up a huge stock of this particular weapon from this place, say the Royal Kendron sword, buy up a bunch, so that way I can salvage them into a bunch of iron in order to be able to get iron that way. I want to be very explicit about where you get iron, either as like loot or something that maybe you purchase from a specific vendor somewhere. And I do want the vendors to potentially have different prices on crafting materials as well, so you're kind of incentivized to go around a bit in order to get the best prices. But anyway, that's some of the like salvaging and whatnot. Now, my general inclination is that a lot of your standard equipment is probably stuff that you're going to craft. And I want a lot of the stuff that's like things for salvaging to maybe be less useful. And one of the things that I want to do to differentiate a lot of equipment, I think, is to give them skills. This brings me to another enormous topic that I want to get into, but let's go ahead and... is it game end? Yeah, to title. Let's go ahead and start a new game, and as we're kind of exploring some of that, I will go over some of that, some of these other details. Let's grab Francis, and... who seems fun? How about Talmand? She's actually a really good healer. I'm going to grab Jennifer here. And how about Devin McElroy? So instead of doing the more elaborate thing, or the thing that just gives me everybody, I'm going to just jump in here this way. So obviously this is going to need to be modified, but you can see that I have desaturated this area. I actually have a plugin I made for paint.net, which I guess I could potentially figure out adding to like GitHub or something if people are interested. But I have an add-on to paint.net that allows me to be able to apply the same sort of filter for tinting, or as an adjustment or an effect or whatever, the same sort of effect for tinting, so that way I can test out stuff on the fly there. So if people are interested, I can potentially give it to them. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is I need to equip my character's up. You get one of the... the other tattered tome. Whoop. For some reason, I don't expect that to kind of work the way it does. So right now, I cannot go down. But once I get to the end, I'll be able to. And again, there's going to be a lot of materials and stuff. So I can talk to these. It'll be like, I've observed that those with a strong affinity for fire deal more damage with magic, even beyond what would ordinarily be expected. My studies indicate that those with excellent dexterity are more skillful at landing critical hits. They're also better at evading attacks. My studies indicate that those with incredible strength deal more damage with physical attacks than those with less strength, even if everything else seems equal. I've also observed that such individuals are able to guard more effectively. So again, this is referring back to mechanics that are built into things under the hood. So if you have, I mean, I can kind of go into them in the code here. I think I've talked about these before. But like if you look at, oh, and this area doesn't have any music, it just is drips. I thought that that would be very thematic. So anyway, if I go up to, where is it? Oh, I also realized that this has item right here. It passes the item, so I probably can add metadata to the item for what the maximum stack size is. That's something I may do at some point here. Let's see, where is the... Yeah, like right here, this calculates... Yeah, so if it can be a critical hit, then your dexterity divided by 600 gets added to your critical chance. Now keep in mind when it says divided by 600 that this is as a percentage, so a 1 is a critical hit for, well, something like that. It kind of sets it up in an upper bound and is rolled against and things like that. But basically, imagine this is your dexterity divided by 6 is the percent that's being added. So if you have 36 dexterity, 6 dexterity would theoretically add like another, I don't know, bit to your critical hit, if I remember how all this works correctly. So like if I go to Francis, Francis has 31 dexterity, so theoretically that critical hit rate is being boosted by like 5 by the dexterity stat. And that 4 critical hit rate is the dexterity plus like something probably, but that's basically coming off of the dexterity. Divided by 6 is almost 4. Here she has like no dexterity, so that's why she has such a low critical chance. He has pretty good dexterity plus I think he just has bonus crit chance. So he has a really good crit rate, plus the pipe has like a bunch of critical that it adds as well. So that's why his critical hit rate is really high. His accuracy is absolute garbage because the old pipe has awful accuracy. It has like minus 80 accuracy sort of thing. But his high dexterity combined with other things gives him a very high crit rate. So that's that's going on here. These boost your evasion to magic and regular evasion by basically it's the same sort of thing. Your dexterity over 6 is the percent sort of increase. That's going to predominantly reduce the damage you take. It talks about that later. And so there's a bunch of other things in here where there's like, right here's the thing that I was talking about. So your damage is this. So this is a multiplier for this probably actually needs to go the opposite. No, it needs to go this way. So if you're dealing physical type damage, then this is multiplied by your target's physical damage rate. So if their physical damage rate is, say, 50%, they take half damage, right? If it's 150%, they take 50% more damage. This adds on your attack stat divided by 6 to that as a kind of a percentage multiplier. So if you have 30 strength, then you'll deal 5% more damage with your physical attacks. And then fire is used to boost your magical damage. So the more fire stat you have, the more damage you deal there. This is a calculation for TP. It's based off of like 2 parts, and some of it comes from your attack and some from your defense. So if you add all of these up, 6 plus 6 plus 3 is 15 over 5, which is 3. So it's kind of like 3 parts split in evenly between your strength, your dexterity, and your fire, with fire playing half the role that either strength or dexterity do. Things like that. Water gives you a boost to your mana regen and your MP regen, and your health regen is boosted by your earth stat. So this set of things will basically describe all of that in less technically precise terms. So I've observed that those with a strong affinity for water regain their MP more rapidly than those with a weak affinity for water. Or it seems that those with an affinity for wind find themselves better prepared for battle. Indeed, they start combat with higher TP than do their compatriots. I've observed that those with a strong affinity for earth heal from wounds rapidly. Indeed, their natural ability to regain HP is most impressive. And here we see it reads, "Here lies Metatutorial, the great mind who delved into the very workings of the world. We offer here copies of his most profound discoveries, that they may illustrate the greatness of his endeavor and the worthiness of his pursuit." And then this is some other straightforward mechanics. Or important mechanics to kind of understand what's actually going on here. So, in my travels, I found that accuracy is an important measure. It more often determines the effectiveness of one's hits, though poor enough accuracy can result in outright missing. Experience has shown that having more than 100% accuracy generally increases the damage one would deal, while having less than 100% accuracy decreases damage dealt. It is only with extremely low accuracy is one able to fully miss with attacks. My experience has shown that passive evasion can help reduce the damage that one would take. Specifically, while it is unlikely to evade an attack outright unless one is committing their full efforts to doing so, i.e. using the dodge skill, being more evasive will help one to decrease the impact of an enemy's blows, reducing their damage. And then finally, TP is an unusual measure. Unlike HP or MP, its stores are limited not by one's direct capacity, but rather by some combination of one's strength, dexterity, and fire affinity. Then here we have some healing potions. Here we have a thing here about the Temple of Sacred Waters, and Metatutorial wanting to be buried beside them. We can come in here, and it just says that they heal you, and if you step in it, it's all splashy, and it will, in fact, heal you. So if I try to go through this relatively quickly, well, I've stumbled upon a room full of healing potions. I might want to scramble some of these chests rather than have them all in the same place. Here's some cave spiders. So this is our first actual encounter. They don't give a whole lot of experience. They're not particularly dangerous. Having Gust there is really useful. I don't need a Draining Dark, these guys. A Draining Dark just will one-shot them, probably. Blitz is actually good. I should try attacking anything to charge Blitz up. Well, or I could just get a critical hit. I think these guys are weak to blunt damage, too. So the pipe will actually do a bit better against them than some stuff. Again, these are designed to be weak early enemies that are fairly straightforward to take out. That spider is just about dead. All of them are. So this should be able to finish these guys off. So if you're getting everything, I think you'll probably be around level 2 to 3 by the time you get out of here, just because of it's a long enough path and enough enemies to fight, but you'll also have a bunch of goodies as a result. Let's Death Strike here. Enervating Bolt. I don't think they take a ton of damage from certain things, but yeah. Enervating Bolt was not great. They are weak to blunt, or to striking, as I recall. So, yeah, if I try to ignore chests and get through here as quickly as possible, to kind of just show mechanic stuff, let's just attack our bat friends here. Ooh, got a nice critical there. The dagger has a nice bunch of critical hit as well that it adds, which is boosting Francis's critical hit rate. Gust is extremely useful here, by the way. I think I need to go down this way. I'm just going to mash attack here. That's probably good enough. The answer is yes. Yes, it is more than good enough. So this is a nice little store of materials, and I can come down over here. Gust, attack a different spider. Attack a different spider. Oh, and poison. Excellent. Yeah, I go through the whole round of beating up my party, but again, they don't deal a ton of damage, so it's not too bad. And Gust will help clear this out really pretty well. Silence is a little unnecessary there, but sure. You can go after that one, you can go after that one, you can go after that one, and you can go after that one. There we go. This should clear out the spiders pretty easily. Again, these are not meant to be especially threatening enemies. They're supposed to be enough to kind of get your feet wet, get a little bit used to the feel and flow of combat. And again, I'm probably going to want to move some of these treasure chests around and scramble them a bit more, just that way it doesn't feel so much like the same thing over and over again. I'm going to have you shoot that with electricity. Yeah, that spider's almost dead. That critical hit just means that he gets his stuff back, which is nice. Where are we? Half an hour-ish into this. Yeah, I'll take that healing potion as well. There's more loot off to the side, but I'm going to ignore it for the moment. Just attack my way through this. So you can spend like half an hour here looting everything. Ow, it hurt. And now we come up here and it says unbar the door and we step through. Now, a couple of important notes. You will not encounter enemies before you cross past this chest. I've turned off enemy spawns in those areas. That heals my party, as you can see. The other thing that's important to note is that there are actually no enemy spawns within this area here down to the exit. So if we look back in the ancient catacombs, and again, the loot probably needs to be better divvied out, so it feels a bit better. But right here, no enemy spawns are in the areas that aren't marked 1. So you can see that there's a few areas you can reliably enter into here, pass through that center area, and get to the healing area without actually having to worry about fighting anything. Of course, you do have to contend with enemies out here. But, you know, whew, looks like my volume's a little loud. I apologize for any clipping that's doing. I just now noticed it, so I'm going to turn myself down ever so slightly so it doesn't peak as much. I should still be understandable. But anyway, so that's some of the major stuff that's been going on there. But one of the other things is that, as you may have noticed, I've been adding... So I don't really care about this group. So if I go back here and I continue these dudes, and I go to their skills, I need to modify this so it's a little bit different. But you'll notice Steel Rune Arrow and Antidote are coming off of her equipment. And if I go to a different character... oh, he has Showmanship now. I should add that. That's a new initial ability for... what is he? The Berserker. Remember, he's supposed to be a performer. I felt that Battle Rage, as it was a bit... I didn't like the gameplay of it, because it encouraged this sort of cycle of using the skill that hits somebody Opening Strike. So it used Opening Strike to get a bunch of TP, and then Battle Rage to burn all of your TP to kill something. And that just didn't feel like it was a good playstyle. So what I've instead done is moved Battle Rage to be a much later skill, and then made it an MP skill that does damage based on your current TP, and always adds the state Rage, and it hits all enemies. Showmanship also hits all enemies. It has a high chance of inflicting Fascination and does damage based on the Wind and Earth stat because it does life damage. I like the idea that he's showing off, and it's that way sort of thing, and it causes Fascination. That seems a good fit, and Fascination is the life condition. So here we are. There have probably been a few other tweaks to skills. I already mentioned Poultice. Apply Poultice. And let's see, is there anything else that really jumped around in between things? I'm just scrolling through to see if anything stands out to me. I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think there's anything different from last time there otherwise. But you'll notice right here is Antidote, right? This is a property of his armor. Because if we go to his equipment, you'll see he's using a walking stick, which it gives a slight bonus to the guard effect, but it just kind of fits him reasonably well. But he has a breastplate. If I take this off and I go to his skill list, he no longer has Antidote because it, of course, is given to him by the adventurer's breastplate. And so I've been thinking a lot about some of the progression of stuff in the game. I'm going to go ahead and close this now because I don't need it open right now, I don't think. But I've been thinking a lot about this progression and the way that the characters are interacting with skills and leveling up and the way that whole thing plays out. I've definitely had some frustrations, if I go back over here, with some of this, as you've heard me talk about, where it's not really all that unique feeling and stuff like that. Combined with having a lot of experimenting around with the equipment, giving characters skills, and like attaching, say, Backstab to the Adventurer's Dagger or Fierce Thrust. Parry, there's a parry stance that's assigned to the Royal Kendron Sword, for example. And so what I've been thinking a lot about is how do I want some of this, for lack of a better word, skill play aspect of the game. How do I want that to interact with the way that everything's kind of set up otherwise? And what I'm thinking is, because like obviously I put a lot of work into planning all this stuff out and figuring out all these skills and putting all this stuff together. I did put a lot of time into trying to figure that out and process it, but it also is kind of limiting. The Prismage's default fire skill is Fireball, just like the Sorcerer's, and just like the War Mage's. And I don't necessarily hate that, but it feels like I've got a lot of different things that fire can do, and it feels like it's very limited in terms of what my options are. And so I've been thinking some about, okay, how do I want to handle this? Do I like the way that this plays? And what I'm strongly considering at this point is adding a new equipment type for skill set, is just kind of what I want to call it, where rather than giving the characters necessarily these sets of default skills, like the Siphon MP, Elemental Blast, Resurrect, Meditate, etc., the skills in green that are the default sort of generic skills, abandoning that system for something where, and potentially, yeah, and just using the unique skills, right? And instead of doing it this way, having some of those skills on equipment, but especially having those skills plus more skills on a specific skill set item. This is still something that I'm thinking through and would need to do some planning through and some theory crafting and some play testing. My general thought is that I would have like, here's a couple of different categories of skill sets. So just like there are different types of chest armor, for example, there are different types of skill sets. So kind of spitballing things like there's the mage, and then there's the healer, and there's the I don't know, woodsman or ranger or something. Not probably not named after a class, but you get the idea. Spell sword is one that I think I'd use for like the whammo and berserker, and maybe the ninja. So just kind of this idea, or like an assassin one that maybe the ninja and the special forces might get, as an example. So I've been kind of trying to think around a little bit of how do I want to actually approach some of this stuff, where maybe it's like, oh, and then you get this skill set from here, and you get this skill set from there, and you can use them to do things, and have like the sort of backbone of each character be the unique skills that they get. So the interception, the leader strike, the vigorous strike, the get well, the shake it off, the get up, those sorts of things that are like, these are unique, right? These are unique. These are kind of the backbone of the profession or the class. Guild Wars 1 play makes me want to say profession instead of class. But anyway, the character class. And then have it where each class has like, here's a set of things that you can use to augment your skills. So you have your skills coming from level up that are kind of unique to you. You have skills coming from equipment, and then you have skills coming from skill set. So this is still something that I'm thinking through, and I need to play with the idea some. I just thought about it more recently and haven't had time to really sit down and experiment with it. But that's something that's a direction that I'm looking to go, and it does mean a lot of reconfiguring things. But I think that's something where, like, it's an iterative process making a game. And one of the things that I want from playtesting is I want trade-offs, and I want things where the number of skills that you have is manageable, because that's another concern that I have. If I'm adding a bunch of skills to equipment, and then you're getting a bunch of skills through leveling up, scrolling through the sages, actually, this is a spot where it's useful to load the game up again. So let's go ahead and get into combat. This shouldn't be too hard to do, I say, wandering around here until the middle of the day. Okay, so here's a fight. If I go into skills, this ain't too bad. This isn't a ton of skills to scroll through or anything, and I pretty much always want to do the same thing. I want opening strike. So this is one of the problems. When you start off, you don't have a lot of skills, and to be fair, I don't want to start you off with a ton of skills, but I want to allow that to be able to open up to a certain degree and have sort of a general pool of like, here's maybe where you very first start, right? You start off with this skill set, and maybe it's a little small, like 2 or 3 skills. But then like maybe a standard skill set is like 5. Spitballing some numbers here, I don't know for sure, but something like that. So let's look. Oh, these are a lot of skills. There's a lot of different things this character can do. This is maybe a good, like, this comes off of weapon, this comes off of one piece of armor. Maybe I want another, like, couple of skills, like another, say, 1 to 3 skills off of equipment. And then, like, 5 off of a skill set, and then, like, you can already see how, like, even without, this character has a lot of skills, and I want to be careful how many skills I'm giving you, how many options I'm giving you. I want you to have to think about what this character's role is, and I also want you to be able to have to make decisions about what skills you actually want to have access to. Something like Windborne Speed has proven to be ridiculously strong because it guarantees an extra turn. The best thing that I can do with this character right now is Windborne Speed her, and then use that to start Windborne Speeding the rest of my team. Now, that's a fundamental flaw in how good Windborne Speed is. which I'm probably going to tweak down to be like a 25 or 50% chance or something, rather than 100% chance of an extra action. But the point still stands that there's a lot of skills here, and these lists are only going to grow. And I like the idea of having a little bit more variety in terms of the number of skills that you have access to without just adding a bunch of lists where all the skills are competing against each other. Again, I spent a lot of time playing Guild Wars 1. You can see it all over my channel. And it's a game that has heavily influenced my thinking. And I like systems where, and frankly, I played a lot of Magic the Gathering too, very similar concept. I like systems where you're having to think through what stuff are you bringing, when are you bringing it, and like where you have to kind of like play trade-offs. And one of the other things too is like these things rely off of your stats. I like the idea of having skills be able to be more transferable, so that way they're not always like the same skill every time you like. This fireball will kind of follow this exact same trajectory every time on this character, but it looks different on a different character, right? And so I've kind of talked around this quite a bit, but the basic point that I'm getting at here is I want to think about what I'm doing with my skills in a broader sense, and having the ability to open up my player characters to have a wider variety of skills while not necessarily introducing a huge quantity of skills that they're actively using, are actively having access to at any given time, is best facilitated by having some sort of system that trades out skills, and having that be something where it is connected to the skill set idea. Allows me to be able to say, okay, if you want this skill, these are the other skills you can bring with it, but it means you don't get these skills, and things like that, where you're making trade-offs and making decisions about what skill set you want to use. And I'm also considering having you only able to get one of each skill set, so that way you can't say, oh, I want all my characters to have this one. I'm going to load them up with it and stuff like that. So again, that's something that I'm thinking about. I'm kind of theory crafting on a little bit. I'm going to think about how I want to set everybody up, but I like the idea of there being some of these skill set. I like this skill set idea in terms of kind of what it does and how it can kind of approach things. So we'll see if I go about doing it for next week, but that's certainly something I'm thinking about. One other minor thing that I just remembered is I did add, so I added all these food things last time. I've added an adventurers kit. I'm planning on having this be something that you can do stuff with, and the first thing that you can do with this is cook. That's going to be my plan. You get to cook with this, and I'm going to have it where each rank in the Adventurers Guild unlocks additional functionality to this. I haven't done any real planning with it beyond that. I was just thinking about I need some way of having you cook. What could the key item in the big tent be? Or like thinking about adding it there. And I'm like, no, this seems like an adventurers kit, something that I should give you when you sign up at the Adventurers Guild. So I'm just kind of thinking through some of that. So because I wanted some way to start having cooking being a thing, and I don't see a reason to say, oh, you have to go to such and such a place to be able to cook. Maybe I will limit the recipes, and maybe you have to go to like a better cook to be able to cook more things. I don't know. But yeah, I have very nebulous plans for food that are going to need to get more concrete as time goes on. But that, I think, is going to go ahead and cover things for today. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. So thank you all very much for watching. And hopefully I haven't forgotten anything like this tomb was forgotten. And until next time, everyone, take care. Goodbye.